Hi, I'm Lilia Lewis. Welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, today our lesson is going to be faith or fierce. Now, I know we had a lesson on faith versus fear, FEAR, but today we're going to say, what would you choose? Based on what we're going to read, based on what we're going to talk about, what would you choose? Would you choose faith or fierce, FIERCE? And this is going to be based on the story of David and Goliath. And I know a lot of us already know the story, but I want to, just talk a little bit about what led up to the battle between David and Goliath. So our story today is going to be taken from the book of First Samuel. But first, let's talk a little bit about Samuel himself. Let me tell you a little bit about him. But because what it is, Samuel was a prophet. He was a prophet of the Lord. And he prayed continually, all for years and years, for the safety of the Israelites. And no matter what their situation was, he continually prayed for them that the Lord would protect them and keep them from all harm. And he's still praying for them now because they're having such a hard time with the Philistines. Well, not only them, but all the surrounding areas because the Philistines were extremely strong. Their armies were humongous and they could just defeat anybody. And if they came into your city, they would just take your stuff, your animals, your food, anything of value, and take over the city. So previously, the Israelites had a battle with um, the Philistines, but at that time, the Philistines won, and Israel lost everything because the Philistines came in and their armies were so humongous. They just took over not only their land and their possessions, but they took the Ark of the Covenant, which was also called the Ark of God. But this was very, very sacred to the Israelites for their worship. So we're going to go to chapter 5 because we're going to start in chapter 5, but we're going to progress. We're going to go through a few chapters here, and we're going to look at chapter 5, um, and them taking the Ark of the Covenant created actually a problem for them. They thought they were doing something, the Philistines, because they just took everything in sight. But let's read, just go through verse 2 and 4, where it tells us, it says, when the Philistines took the Ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it beside him. Now, Dagon was the idol that they worshiped. So they set the Ark of the Covenant right beside Dagon. But look what happened. When the people of Ashdod woke up early the next morning, Dagon had fallen to the floor, face down. Their God was laying on the floor, face down. But they didn't understand that, so I guess they figured it just toppled or whatever, and they stood it back up. Well, they did that 2 or 3 days, and 2 or 3 days, every time they came down the next morning, he was laying on the floor again with his face down. But the last time, he he had no head, and both his hands were gone, and he lay down with no head, and only the stump, the bust, was standing at this point. So now they didn't know what to do with this. Now they're getting a little nervous. So nobody now would go to the house of Dagon. That was their place of worship. But now even the priests and everybody, the people, the priests, everybody was scared about this. and they didn't know what to do. So let's go to chapter 11. Look what it says. It says, so they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines. And they said, what shall we do with this ark? It's destroying everything. And they said, send away the ark of God of Israel and let it go back again to its own place, so that it will not slay us or our people. For there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city. The hand of God was very, very heavy. So that's how that went. So they wanted to return the ark because they figured they had to get it out of their possession because it wasn't working for them because they had their own God. And every time they went back, their God was laying on the floor. Now he has no head and no palms. So let's go to chapter 7. And chapter 7, let's see, we're going to start in verse 3. And verse 3 tells us Saul, he was king at the time. Now don't forget, Saul spoke unto all the house of Israel, saying, if you do return unto the Lord, now that they've gotten the Ark of the Covenant back, because see, the whole time that the Philistines had it, they didn't have their ark, so they were worshiping idols as well. So now Samuel is telling them, um, he's telling them right now, okay, you've got the ark back. Now, if you return yourselves unto the Lord with all your hearts, and put away those strange gods that you had among you, and prepare your hearts unto the Lord, and serve him only, he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. So they did. They did as they were told. And Samuel said, gather all of Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray for you unto the Lord. Because that's what Samuel did. He was the go-between the people and the Lord. And he prayed for them continually. Okay, so now when the Philistines heard that the Israelites were praying again to this God that keeps knocking their God down, they got angry. And they gathered themselves together and they went up against the Israelites. But you know what? The Israelites were still afraid because their armies were so big, they didn't want to get taken over again. They were really upset about that. So now this time, let's go to verse 10. Because they got really scared and they asked Samuel, please pray for us so God does not let us die. And Samuel said he would, and he did. He did. Now, where are we at? Verse 10. So, as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering for the Israelites, this was the offering they were sending up to God to protect them. And as he was sending up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to do battle against Israel. But the Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistines and discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. Now let's look at verse 13. So the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more into the coast of Israel. And the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. How about that? You see, Samuel was totally dedicated to God. And the people were dedicated as well until they lost the covenant. And it looked like then they lost the faith that they had. And they started worshiping the wrong thing, the idols. But anyway, so now that the Philistines are gone out of their area, they don't have to worry anymore. But now let's go to verse 8 or chapter 8, because this is under the heading of Israel demands a king. So let's just go to verse 3, and we're going to read a couple verses. So it says, well, Samuel, he was getting old, first of all, and he made his sons judges over Israel to take his place. But verse 3 says his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside and they took bribes and did perverted judgments. So then all the elders got together and they came to Samuel. They came to him and they said, behold, you are old and your sons don't walk in your ways. We want a king. Give us a king. Make us a king to judge over us like all the other nations do. But this didn't please Samuel. And he said, when they said, give us a king. So Samuel, he had to go talk to God about this. He didn't know what to do. So he did. So let's go. Samuel prayed to the Lord. Verse 7. And the Lord said unto him, hearken, that means listen. So, okay, go ahead, listen to the voice of the people and listen to everything that they say. He said, this is God talking to Samuel. He says, they didn't reject you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Now, see, they're rubbing God the wrong way because they know there should be no human king because he's the king. So this did not please Samuel, and at the same time, it didn't please God. And God was telling him, they should not be requesting you to get them a king. According to all the things which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this very day, they have forsaken me and served other gods. And so now, go ahead, he said, go ahead, tell them, let them know that you'll let them have a king. So, but Samuel thought, well, I'll tell them what that's going to do for them. How's this king thing going to work since you're worried about what all the other nations have? So look at this, verse 11. He's telling them, Samuel is telling all the people, now look, this is how it's going to work if you got a king. You're not going to have all the privileges you have now because he's going to tell you what to do. So verse 11 says, this will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. First of all, he's going to take your sons and appoint them for himself. They're going to be running his chariots. They're going to be his horsemen. And some shall run on foot. They're going to be foot soldiers. So that right away, you're losing your sons. And he'll appoint some to captains and some over this, that, and the other. And then some on the ground. Some are going to be reaping his harvest. Some are going to be making his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. And that's what I'm going to do with all your sons. And all your daughters are going to be confectionaries, cooks, bakers. So that means they're going to be everybody, all the females will be in the kitchen doing the housework, whatever needs to be done. And then he says, and he will take your fields away from you, and your vineyards and your olive yards, all the best of them. Now he's going to take all your good stuff and give it to his servants. Then he's going to take 1/10 of everything you got, your seed, your vineyards, and give that to his officers and to his servants. Then he's going to take your men servants and your maid servants and your best young men and all your animals and put them to work for him. He's going to take 1/10 of your sheep, and you shall be his servants. And if you don't listen to me, you will cry out in that day because of your king, which you shall have chosen, and the Lord will not hear you. The Lord will not hear you. So he told them exactly how it was going to be. And look what happens. They still didn't want to hear it. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. And they said, oh, no, no, we will have a king over us. That was the biggest mistake of their life. And he tried to forewarn them. So how many times, think about it yourself, have you done that? I've done it quite a few times. But this just goes to show you, if you don't listen to the signs of God, if you don't listen to your warnings, what can happen? And for them, it did. For them, it did. All right, so here we go to chapter 9. And in chapter 9, it was just telling you that Samuel was told by God to anoint Saul as the captain over the people of Israel. So in chapter 10, it goes forward to tell you that Samuel took the vial of oil and poured it upon Saul's head, and he kissed him. And Samuel also made a burnt offering and his sacrifices, pieces for sacrifice, peace offerings. And Saul began to prophesy because as he was being anointed, he was really changing into a different person. And he did. He became a new person, an actual man after God. He actually became a man after God. And let's run over to verse 24. It says, and Samuel said to all the people, see ye him whom the Lord has chosen, that there is none like him among all you people. And all the people shouted and said, God save the king. Okay, let's see how that works out for him. Now we're going to go to chapter 11. And we're going to read just a couple verses, 14 and 15. Let's see what that says. Chapter 11, verse 14 and 15 says, then Samuel said to the people, come and let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there. And all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord of Gilgal. And they had sacrifices and peace offerings. And Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced. Okay, well, that's how that went. That wasn't too bad. All right, let's see what chapter 12 has for us. Chapter 12 says, let's go to verse 13. Okay, now it says, therefore, behold the king whom you have chosen and whom you have desired. And behold, the Lord has set a king over you. Now you got what you asked for. And verse 14 says, if you will fear the Lord and serve him and obey his voice, not rebel against the commandment of the Lord, then shall both you and the king that reigns continue following the Lord your God. But if you don't obey the voice of the Lord, if you rebel against him, then the hand of the Lord shall be against you, as it was against your fathers. And the people asked Samuel to pray for them because they had sinned and they knew it by serving those other gods. They knew that. And then on verse 20, it says, so Samuel said unto the people, okay, I will pray, which he did, for God's forgiveness to them for having what they did. And he said, fear not, you have done all this wickedness, yet turn not aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. But if you still do wickedly, you shall be consumed. How about that? You and your king. You and the king will be consumed. So Saul reigned for 2 years. And after they had a battle, and Saul sounded the trumpets all over. He wanted everybody in the land to know. Let all the Hebrews hear that Saul has smitten a garrison of the Philistines. But he hadn't. Actually, his son Jonathan had smitten a garrison in the city of Geba. But Saul was saying, look what I've done. I did this. I smite the Philistines. But it's actually his son. But the worst part about it that when the Philistines heard him bragging, I guess, now they mad all over again. So they gathered up all the people they could to go and fight Israel again. And they still have the biggest army. They had 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and thousands of foot soldiers. Thousands. And when the men of Israel, I should say, heard that they were coming, now they're getting scared all over again. And the people begin to run and hide and scatter, and they hid in caves and thickets and rocks and high places, in pits, any place out of the sight of the Philistines. But Saul, he was still in Gilgal. He was waiting for Samuel. But when Samuel didn't come back, according to the time, now let's go to chapter, where we at, 13, verse 9. When Saul didn't come back, when Samuel didn't come back, Saul told his men, he said, bring me a burnt offering and a peace offering. And he offered the burnt offering. And this was supposed to be his burnt offering he was sending up to God. But he wasn't supposed to do that without Samuel. And look at verse 10. It came to pass that as soon as he made the end of the offering, the burnt offering, here comes Samuel. And Saul went out to greet him. And Samuel said, what have you done? And Saul said, well, I saw the people were scattering and I didn't know what to do. So I decided I would just have an offering and offer it up to God. And he says, oh, no, you didn't do that. He didn't do it. He said, well, what you've done is very foolish. Very foolish. Oh, for thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord, which he commanded you. For now would the Lord have established your kingdom forever. But now your kingdom will not continue. The Lord has sought him a man after his own heart. He's got someone else in mind because you're not doing as he told you to do. So, let's see, where are we? Chapter 15 says, okay. So Saul was he was upset. He was upset for what he had done. And he asked Samuel, he said, please pray for me. And he was given another chance. Samuel said, okay. Samuel really wanted him to do right. So Samuel said, okay. And Saul was given one more chance by God to redeem himself. So Samuel told him that the Lord said, tell Saul to go and smite the Amalekite for what they had done to Israel when they came out of Egypt. Destroy everything and everybody. And look at verse 9. But Saul and the people, they spared the king Agag, and they spared the best sheep, the ox, and anything that was worthwhile, they saved. And that wasn't what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to kill everything and everybody, and they didn't do that. So what happened? When Samuel came back and he says, well, why do I hear these sheep and why do I hear? He said, oh, well, we were saving that for sacrifice and we saved the king. What'd you save the king? The Lord said to destroy everything and everybody. Bring the king to me. And they did. And they did. But what happened after that? Saul brought the king Agar to them, to Samuel, but that was the end of that because Samuel ended up killing the king because that's what was supposed to happen. And then he killed all the animals like that was supposed to happen. So now Samuel didn't see Saul anymore until the day he died. But in the meantime, look what happened. Now we're on chapter 16, and God has already spoken to Samuel. And he says, go to this man Jesse and find me a king. I will tell you when you found him. And after Saul saw 7 of Jesse's sons, he says, these are not. The Lord said, none of these. Don't you have any other kids? And he says, yeah, my youngest, but he's out feeding the sheep, and go get him. Send him in here. So Saul sent a message to Jesse. And so now Samuel sees David. He's the youngest. And he says, arise and anoint him, for this is he who I sent you to find. So then that's how that went. So now where are we at? Chapter 16. So then David was anointed by Samuel, and Saul wanted David to come to him because he played the harp, and the harp was relaxing, and he liked David. So after a while, he asked, could David just come and stay with him? Asked his father, can he stay with me? And he said, okay. So in the meantime, while David was there, that's when the Philistines came back. They were preparing for another battle. There was one on this side of the mountain, one on that side of the mountain, and then there was Goliath. And all the men of Israel were scared to fight Goliath. And David says, well, what are they going to give the guy that kills him? And, you get all this gold and silver and all this stuff. So, David he said, well, I'll do it. I'll do it. So once they said that, they went and told Saul. He said he could. So make a long story short, Saul gave David permission. He said, here, take my armor and all this. He says, no, I can't use that. I cannot use that. So Saul was trying to talk him out of it, but he didn't. So let's go quickly to verse 34 in chapter 17. David said unto Saul, I'm not too young. He says, well, I kept my father's sheep, and there was a bear the bear came after me, a lion came after me. If I can kill them, I can kill this Philistine. So he says the Goliath came down the mountain his side, and he came down his side. And they fought. And of course, David slew him with the slingshot, 5 stones and a slingshot, because he said, my God will protect me. I don't need the armor. I don't need anything. I've got God. So let me just ask you this. Who or what is the Goliath in your life? And wouldn't you like to acquire the same type of faith that David had? I would. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So go to your Bible when you have time and read First Samuel, and you'll see all this and put yourself in David's place. And always remember, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And until next week, I'm Lilia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.